Thanks everybody for joining us today. Today we're going to have a session with Sean Dawes from RNX, and Sean is also part of the INCON technology group. So any of you who are technology experts in your companies, we do have a technology group and we're happy to have you participate in that. We meet on a quarterly basis and Sean is our chair. So today, Sean is going to talk about AI-powered events, how the rise of ChatGPT will redefine events as we know them. So over to you, Sean.
Thanks, Angela. That's wonderful. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the talk. I'm really happy to see so many people interested in this topic. I'm pretty excited about it myself, so it's nice to see I'm in good company. So just to let you know, there will be a small amount of audience participation in this talk. So if you could find the controls for the chat section, that would be handy so that we can get your feedback as we go along. But yeah, we're going to go through it and I'll show you a little bit of how ChatGPT works, and we will just sort of talk through how this is going to impact the events that we're putting on over the next few years and beyond. And as Angela said, we'll have some time for some questions at the end, which I hope you take advantage of and ask away. I'm really interested to see, I guess, where we're up to and how everyone's feeling about this particular topic. So yeah, let's get going. So, all right, so AI-powered events basically is what this is all about. So obviously in the last 6 months, the invention of ChatGPT has really hit the mainstream. And I'm not sure outside of the tech side of things, but my inbox, my social media feed, everything else, all it is ChatGPT, everything. And if it's not ChatGPT, it's every other large language model or crazy AI invention that's coming through. So I'm going to try to distill some of that down for you all today. We're going to focus mainly on ChatGPT, but it's really the tip of the iceberg. There's a million other things to talk about. So if you are interested in more than just ChatGPT down the track, please let me know at the end. It's something that I could talk about for hours and hours. So more than happy to help you out with that side of things. So I guess the first and obvious question is, what is ChatGPT? So basically, ChatGPT is what's known as a generative language model. So basically, it is a machine learning model that takes a huge amount of data, processes it, and is used to develop new insights from that data. So the idea of a machine learning model has been around for a long time, decades even, and has been used all throughout IT for a long time now. But using it in this way is relatively new. So just to describe how this actually works. So if you look at machine learning is essentially a type of artificial intelligence that's been used, as I said, for years and years. And what it really involves is just taking essentially a endpoint of where you want to end up, and then teaching the AI model how to get to that point. So for example, you might want to teach a model how to recognize a picture of a banana. And what you do is you basically have this machine and you say, this is a banana, and it shows you what it is, and train it to recognize different versions of it. It makes up its own rules on how it will recognize what that banana is. Once you've trained it, then you take it and you put it onto a large amount of data and you say, give me your best guess of which one of these is a banana. At the end of that process, you take a look at it and say, well, you did this one well, you did this one poorly. Let's take the models that you created for the ones that did well and retrain them again. And you refine it and refine it, refine it to the point that you get a machine or a program that's able to actually easily recognize that banana every single time, or nearly every single time. So that's the primary sort of process behind ChatGPT. But what makes ChatGPT interesting is they've taken enormous amounts of data, terabytes and terabytes, petabytes, like basically a massive chunk of the internet, from Wikipedia, Reddit, a whole bunch of ebooks, tons and tons of stuff. And they've basically said, what we want to do is predict what the next letter is going to be. And at its core, that's all GPT does. It just takes this huge amount of text and basically works out the probabilities of what the next thing is going to be in the line. And the result is that it can produce very realistic, very human sounding conversational texts and prompts that we can then use and interact with. So ChatGPT itself is actually an interesting idea. They've taken that GPT model and they've inserted it into a chatbot, which allows us to interact with it in a comfortable and sort of familiar way. So that user interface aspect of it, I think, is what's brought ChatGPT to the forefront in the non-technical mainstream. And it's something that is extremely exciting because when you use it, it looks like magic, and it's almost hard to believe that it works the way it does. So first part of the interactive session, hands up or a thumbs up emoji or something, who has actually used ChatGPT or seen it used? Nobody. One person. Thanks, Julian. All right, so at least some of you, I assume, have used it before. We're going to give you a little demo on what it looks like. So for those people who don't know what I'm actually talking about, we'll just give you a bit of brief overview, just a little bit of a trial and see what it looks like. So this is ChatGPT. It's very simple. All it is literally a chat box. It's like an instant messenger. And you can pretty much ask it anything. You can talk to it. You can do math with it. You can do all sorts of things with it. But let's just use something simple. So if someone can give me an example of just an animal, first person to write an animal into the chat box, let's deal with that. A rhino. Okay, a rhino and an ape. All right, let's do with both of those. So we're going to have ChatGPT write us a poem. Write us a poem about a rhino and an ape. All right, so you can see, obviously, extremely fast. It can go through and produce a pretty lovely poem here. So we'll just read it out to see what it's like. In a land where nature's wonders roam, a tale unfolds of creatures unknown, a rhino mighty adorned with a horn, and an ape agile in the jungle born. So you can see just from this example, already it kind of knows what a rhino is, where they live, what an ape is, what they do, all that sort of thing. Is put it into a rhyming, set of verses, and it's produced something basically brand new that's never been seen before. And what's really interesting is if we regenerate it, it doesn't produce the same thing again. It'll actually produce a whole new version of what it thought you wanted. So you can go through that and you can actually try different responses, and you can regenerate your answers until you get something you want. Potentially, you might want to change it, and you could say, okay, no, wait a minute, actually make it about a panda. And it'll understand what you're talking about, and it'll make the changes accordingly. So this is a very simple example, one that you probably won't use on a day-to-day basis, but it demonstrates exactly what ChatGPT is able to do. So we can use this as event people to do some pretty amazing things. So let's say, for example, we're going to start a new event, a new conference. We're going to start it tonight. What are we going to do our conference on? Anybody, first person to respond, tell me what you want to see a conference about. Pediatrics, fantastic. All right, so we're going to do create a conference about pediatrics in 2023. Where should it be located? Where do you guys want to have this conference? In Dublin and Sydney. Okay, we need a program and a nice blurb to type, entice delegates. Okay, fair bit of stuff going on in that prompt. We'll see what it comes up with. All right, so we're flying from Dublin to Sydney in a day, which is a bit full on, but we can manage it, I'm sure. We've got a morning session, we've got different tracks, we've got lunch breaks, all these sort of things. All right, so it's understanding what a conference is, what's the important parts, and we can refine these things, we can change them, we can replace different things. We can say, recommend a good speaker from Ireland. Okay, we've got a few people in there. Now, this information is always a bit tricky. You want to make sure that you double check any actual specific things that it provides to you, just because the information that's been trained on only goes up until 2021. So the last couple of years worth of information basically don't exist as far as ChatGPT is concerned. What it will often do, though, if it doesn't know what it is that the answer is, it will actually make it up, and it'll make something up extremely convincingly. So I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but we got to be careful with these sort of things. But just to give you an example, that's kind of a broad overview of what we can do with it. It's really the tip of the iceberg. And also we're using ChatGPT 3.5, which is the version that sort of came out in December. And it's now been upgraded to version 4, which is even more powerful than this and does more interesting things. The question, why does Chat not search in recent information? So with ChatGPT, this is basically a sandbox. It's really almost like a demo, so you can see and use the underlying mechanics of ChatGPT. It's not designed really as a tool that you can be used every day. It's or with up-to-date information. It's kind of just a base to show you what can be done. But there's exciting stuff coming on the search information aspect, which I will touch on in a minute as well. But yeah, needless to say, this one that we can all play with, no internet, but there are new versions and other plugins and everything else that's coming out that will allow you to do that. So think of this as a starting point. This is like a playground, a sandbox, and really tip of the iceberg. All right, so that's ChatGPT. That's sort of what it looks like. I highly recommend grabbing a license. It's free to play with. I'll put the link up later on so you can see how to get it. But essentially, just go on, create an account. You can link it to your Microsoft account if you'd like, and you can go on, play it to your heart's content. If you want to have a paid version, which will give you a better reliability to make sure it doesn't sort of stop working halfway through, and access to ChatGPT 4 is $20 US a month. You just basically sign up online and you're good to go. That will give you access to the latest and greatest features as they come out. But back to the presentation. So people are already starting to use ChatGPT even in this form. There's also an API that's available, and some companies are starting to leverage that as well. So what they're doing is actually integrating ChatGPT with their own products, and they're using other similar GPT models to integrate with their products. So companies like Snapchat, Facebook, Salesforce, they all are starting to use this sort of thing, and you'll see more and more that these AI things will be coming out on a regular basis. And a lot of them have ChatGPT under the hood with API access. But one of the big things that it's being used for already, and Elena talked about this a couple of weeks ago in her session, is marketing. So you can imagine what it's like. Every marketer's sort of day to day, you're producing content, lots and lots of content. You've got EDMs doing blog posts, social media posts, Twitter, every type of thing. And there's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so many people that you can employ to do these things. And where ChatGPT is really helpful is for drafting those different posts and whatnot. So literally going into ChatGPT, doing a prompt saying, I need to do an EDM based on this conference or this update on this event, and basically it will produce you a pretty reasonable marketing email that you can look at, you can refine on your own, or you can send straight out, and you've just saved yourself potentially hours and hours of time. And a lot of companies are starting to do that. Marketing from an AI perspective is definitely on the rise. It's probably the one area that ChatGPT so far is already starting to really make an impact in. And you will see more and more of this as we go on. And it's something I think if you're going to start looking into ways that you could use ChatGPT, this would probably be a good place to start. HR is the other one. So this has been quite surprising, actually. I suppose when you think of an HR department, they do a lot of hiring. And a big part of hiring, obviously, is looking at resumes. And conversely, the people who are submitting resumes, they obviously write them, and they have to do a cover letter for every single company that they want to apply to. And some people will apply to dozens, if not hundreds, of jobs every week, and having to customize a resume or customize a cover letter to do that is extremely time consuming. But with ChatGPT, you can literally say, here's my template cover letter, change it to so-and-so company, attention to such and such HR person, and it'll do that all for you. It'll customize it. You can tweak your resume all through ChatGPT, even just using the chatbot, and just paste it into your resume so that you're ready to go. So anything like that where you're doing a lot of content writing or analyzing of that content, ChatGPT is really helpful. And the other big one is education right now. So potentially you've heard in the news, there's all sorts of controversy about students using ChatGPT to do their homework for them, to prepare for exams. They've even had people pass the bar exam using ChatGPT and do all sorts of pretty challenging assignments based on what they put into ChatGPT. And it's becoming a big problem. So a lot of schools and whatnot are having to look at their students' work and decide whether or not they've actually done it. And there's even companies developing anti-GPT software, which they're using to test and see if there's actually any chance that the person who submitted that has actually used a GPT type AI to produce that assignment. And more it's coming up that they have. And there's a whole debate on how this is going to affect the education system, where you have, people, the whole system is really designed to make sure that you're being tested on your knowledge, not on your ability to do an efficient prompt in a website. And that's kind of where we're going at the moment. So major disruption in that area at the moment. That general stuff's really good, but how do we use it as events managers and events professionals? Because our industry is special. We've got, a lot of things that we do that other areas don't do. But we also have a lot of common things that we do that many other companies do. And particularly these areas that I'll talk about are things that we do a lot of and where we can have a major impact. The first one is obviously emails. So everybody that I know in events, they do a huge amount of emails. And we're talking 25 to 75% of your day spent, composing or replying to emails every single day. And that takes up a huge amount of our time. But having a GPT type system, being able to actually create, send, analyze emails for you, potentially create rules for helping you clean up your inbox, or even just providing tips on how to use the systems you have in place better. I mean, literally only a couple of weeks ago, we were asked, how do you give me basically 10 tips on how we can improve our use of Outlook. ChatGPT spits it out in 2 seconds. And there's a lot of really good, helpful tips in there that actually made it more efficient, even without having to copy paste or even touching it as far as using the content side of things. So you can do a lot in that side of helpful tools and tips and tricks as well. We even turn that into a blog post that you could just literally say, those are the tips, make this a palatable blog post, write it in plain English, and you're ready to post. So very helpful. The other area that we do a lot of is surveys. So every event, you've got your post-conference survey, you've got your client surveys, you've got your delegate surveys, you've got, even vendors and whatnot, getting feedback from various sources and people, and then you've got to compile all that information. And what happens a lot at the moment is that you send out all these surveys, you get some responses, some not, they get thrown into a big pile of things that need to be analyzed. And maybe there's some great insights in there, but maybe you haven't got the time or you haven't got the resources to go through and troll and find those interesting insights so you can take that and make your next events better. But that's where something like ChatGPT comes into its own, because you can basically throw tons of information at it and it can summarize it for you. You can go through and say, okay, based on the survey information you provided, 20% of respondents think this, or your overall rating for this particular event is 4.5 stars out of 5, however you want to represent it. And you can use that data in a real way to fold back into how you do future events, or to how you change the way you do things at work. So that kind of large information type exchange, again, really a helpful way to use this kind of AI. And as I touched on, summaries. So when we're dealing with events, particularly when we're dealing with events that are outside of our expertise, it can be extremely overwhelming. We do at RNX a lot of scientific and medical type conferences, and the people that you speak to, they're incredibly intelligent, incredibly, have this huge amount of knowledge in an area that oftentimes you've never even heard of. And it can be very difficult to sort of speak to them on their level and to really get the most out of an event if you don't understand what the event's about. Something like ChatGPT can literally give you insights on how those events need to be run or should be run. You can take the information that's provided through the abstracts and whatnot. You can look at conversations. You can put keywords in on things that you're likely to have to come across with this event. And now you can learn about it. You can present information about it. You can digest it more easily. And you can speak in such a way that you understand what's going on. And this sort of insight allows you to really customize the event for your speakers and for your audiences so that they can get the most out of the event. So this area right now is something we're playing with, and it's extremely, extremely valuable. It's something that, I think of all these things, this will be at the core of how we can personalize events all the way down to the individual delegate level in the future. So speaking of the future, we also got one more thing. Sorry, proposals and RFPs and prospectuses, of course. These areas are, again, very high text-based things that we produce. They take hours and hours and hours out of our time. And a lot of times things like a proposal can, take a week to put together, and it may not even end up being selected, and which is heartbreaking when you think of the amount of work it goes in. And I'm not going to talk about tenders. But these sort of things where you can have even a template or some sort of framework that you want to apply at a company level, you could feed that into something like ChatGPT and have it produce, a meaningful prospectus or a meaningful RSP that talks specifically about the event or the services that you want to provide, and customizes it for the inputs that you provide. And this is all tweakable, and it's the kind of thing that you can actually add feedback in as you go along and customize it in your own way. So these all have in common the same thing, which is just time saving. And it's the one thing I think the events industry needs right now, because we have a small amount of people doing a large amount of work, and we're playing catch up for the last 3 years. So it really couldn't be better timing for something like an AI to come on board and be, a tool that we can actually use. So where are we headed? AI right now, this is day one. This is the very beginning. It's already extremely exciting, and we're already able to do a lot of stuff with it, but this is very, very much early days. It's the very beginning. I touched on it before, but the use of APIs is only just starting. Some of the big companies, I said the Salesforces, whatnot, they're using APIs to develop and extend their existing products and to use this technology and leverage it and integrate it with what they have. It, on the whole, since most of these models have been built or they're built externally, they're basically paying a small amount of money for a huge benefit and allowing their customers to have a more customized experience, more natural experience, and one that makes a lot more sense for them. And this is one area that I think we're going to see a lot of. We're going to see basically any app, any website that's able to be linked to with an API. I reckon there's going to be, a huge uptake in how people are integrating these things with ChatGPT. It could be something as simple as having a chatbot on your website that speaks in real language, but could even go beyond that to providing customized, clothing selection, or help you customize a car or anything like that. So APIs are going to be a huge and upcoming area. What's even better is that that's going to be rolled into plugins. So about a month ago, ChatGPT announced that they're going to have a plugin architecture. And what that basically means is, remember back in the day when the iPhone came out, and the iPhone was really exciting and it had, neat icons and whatnot, but it couldn't really do much. You had to get everything from Apple. You had your one email program, you had your one web browser, whatnot. But then they released the App Store, and all of a sudden, almost overnight, you had access to 1,000 apps, different things you could do with it, then 10,000. And now, literally millions of apps that are out there that can be used in different ways to, appeal to specific audiences. And this is where it's going with ChatGPT already. They've launched a beta of the plugins architecture they have. They've got it only in a limited trial right now, unfortunately, so we can't try it out in person. But from what I've seen, they have some of the bigger companies. They got Expedia, who are able to allow you to put together an entire holiday. basically from a ChatGPT prompt. So find me a holiday in Japan in December and tell me where I should go and what I should do. And it'll do there. Do you want to book these flights? Yes, I do. And fully integrated one-stop shop experience, done in real time, done in plain English. So that's one of the examples. We've also got Zapier, which is essentially a platform that connects other platforms. So you can imagine being able to chat GPT with anything out there. You want to hook up to your, potentially your Events Air or your Cvent or, Salesforce. You could put it into, any product you can pretty much think of. Now you can have a chat GPT layer on top of it to help, maybe train people on how to use it, or to actually allow people to speak to it and use voice to text to do data entry. The sky's the limit. But probably the biggest thing that you're going to see in the next 12 months is you're going to hear the word Copilot. So Copilot is very much a Microsoft thing, and it came from one of the first big sort of language or generative language models, which is called Git Copilot. So Git is a source code repository which basically has billions of lines of code, all open source, that they decided to put a AI on top of and create it as a Copilot. And what it can do is help you write code. And basically the idea is that it sits next to you. You can put some code at it, have it debug it for you, add comments, that sort of thing. That concept, now Microsoft is really running with it, and they're going to be rolling it into pretty much everything. So you're going to have a Word Copilot, an Excel Copilot, a PowerPoint Copilot. Each of these a specialized version of ChatGPT 4 that is designed specifically to work and interact with that particular Microsoft product and allow you to do things literally just by saying what you want it to do. So these things are going to be, they're basically in testing now. I'd be surprised if it took another 6 months before you start seeing them coming out into the mainstream. By the end of the year, there'll probably be about 20 new Copilots, all available for you to use as part of your Microsoft subscription. So when I think of what's going to happen and how people are going to be more introduced to AI, this is one area that I think is really going to be the takeoff, and it's going to be a big part of the coming 12 months. All right. The next thing is that it's not always good news. There's always things that make things a bit more challenging, and it's the hurdles really that we have to get over before we can have a really good adoption and make this feel like it's a polished product. The first one is hallucinations. I talked about this at the very beginning a little bit, but hallucinations are basically when ChatGPT decides, I'm just going to make it up. And the problem is that ChatGPT is extremely convincing. So you could say to it, I really want to find out the source of a particular reference from like I can say I wanted to do this presentation, and I want to say, okay, I want to have the definitive source about machine learning, and give me as many references as you can. And it might give you a list of 10 papers that look really realistic. They're from this magazine or this paper, and they're written by this expert and thing. And that could be totally made up. Names could be made up. The papers could be made up. Everything about it could be made up, and you wouldn't know unless you actually went and looked and checked to make sure it was actually good. So this is a big problem with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT 4 has done a lot to address it. It will actually has extra levels of checks and balances in it to make sure it can kind of overcome these problems, but they still exist. And it's one of the probably the biggest gotchas with AI at the moment is people can easily rely on it a bit too much and get themselves in trouble. So on this side of things right now, it's really managed at the user level, where you have to say to yourself, okay, I'm taking this as a suggestion, but I'm still going to check the facts. I'm still going to treat it like I'm an editor and make sure that what I'm putting out there is real and legit. This is extremely important if you're doing something like an email campaign and you're referring to a specific person or thing, just to double check your work. There's no magic bullet at the moment to make sure that that stuff's all right. You just have to do it yourself. The other big thing is privacy. So just in the last few weeks, Italy banned the use of ChatGPT, citing breaches of GDPR and whatnot, and the fact that it didn't have any restrictions for ages. So potentially, a 5-year-old could go on there and, I don't know, teach himself how to make a bomb or something like that. That was the fear, and they essentially went to the EU and spoke, have a lot of conversations with OpenAI about what to do about it. And there have been actually a lot of changes made just in the last couple of weeks to ChatGPT in the back end, which provide a little more security around privacy, particularly in the EU. But this is an area that's probably going to be the one thing that's going to slow the march of ChatGPT down a little bit, because there's a lot of organizations, a lot of governments out there that are really worried that, you know, people are providing tons of new information into the ChatGPT interface, but that no one really knows where that's going. So if you were to put private information up as a part of your prompts, do they get, you know, included into the training sets for future ChatGPT releases? Will that information be queryable if someone says, you know, what does what's Angela's favorite color? And she's put that in there. Maybe I can determine what that is through a future version of ChatGPT. So those sort of questions that are really right now a bit vague and unsure, that need to be answered, I think, before this really hits the point where we can confidently use it in the mainstream. Vendor selection is going to be huge. Just in the past 3 months, we've seen an explosion of new types of AI GPT models, image models, video models, all sorts of crazy stuff coming out there. So if you lock into a vendor now and decide that this is the way we're going to go, there's a very big chance that that particular vendor may not be the best one. They might even go out of business. They might have, you know, issues that other ones may not have. So right now, because everything is really up in the air, there's a lot of new and exciting things happening. It's actually really hard to pick a particular way to go. Right now, I think Microsoft is leading the pack because they're a very familiar name, and they're trying to find that balance between moving forward at a reasonable pace, but also keeping things somewhat under wraps. So they've included ChatGPT 4 in Bing Chat. It's now available to everyone. So if you go to Microsoft Bing, you can actually try out their version of ChatGPT, which is connected to the internet. But it's also very pared down in the sense that it's got a lot of checks and balances to make sure that when you are using it to search the internet, that you're not doing anything nefarious, and that it's all very much PG. So it's yeah, trying to find that balance right now is really the challenging bit. Scams are the other big one. So right now, if you were to get a phishing email from somebody, 9 times out of 10, you look at it and go, that's ridiculous. Nobody from my company would write like that. Doesn't look like my boss wrote that to me. Whereas now, with the right kind of training and the right prompts, potentially people can have emails sent to you that sound like they're from someone you know. They look like they're from someone you know. They can be very convincing in what they're asking you to do. And it's all done through ChatGPT. You don't even necessarily need to be, you know, a native English speaker for it to produce a really good email. So scams are on the rise. They're only going to get more complex, and they're getting more convincing as we go along. So we, particularly as IT people, need to be on top of this, but especially as end users who are receiving these emails, be on our guard to make sure that, you know, even if it looks convincing, do we really know? So this is, again, an area that there's going to be, I think, a bit of an arms race back and forth between the tech people and the scammers to see how who's going to win. But ultimately, it comes down to just, you know, due diligence, making sure you're knowing who's texting you and emailing and whatnot. And last one, the biggest one, is job loss. And this is the one I get asked about most out of anything else is ChatGPT going to take my job? And what's, I think, exciting about being in the events industry is we've just been through 3 years of, is events dead? Are we going to be replaced by virtual conferences? And from at least what we're seeing in Australia, it's been a resounding no. People want to interact in real life. They want to travel to places. They want to see new things, and they don't want to be in front of a computer all day long every day. And that's exciting for us because it means that we actually need people. You can't fake having people talking to each other. You can't fake people on the ground. And I don't think any amount of AI is going to stop that from happening, which means that we can focus on using AI as a tool to help us create bigger, better conferences, do events that are more exciting, more personalized, and cheaper for us to run with a larger impact. So from an events perspective, I think job losses are the least of our concern, and we can really focus on improving our productivity. So what's coming up? So there's a lot of stuff about to happen, and this is all going to get pretty crazy, pretty quick. So as I mentioned before, there's new models and new applications released every day. There is now AI that does pictures, like can do a portrait of a person that looks undistinguishable from a person. You can do videos, you can do music, you can have voices, all these sort of things, all being sort of churned out at the moment. A lot of it's pretty much in the early days, but still very, very, very good, and only getting better. And as more companies take this on and decide on niche applications and whatnot, we're going to see more and more exciting things coming out sooner. The really exciting bit is there are new models that are used to combine other models. So, for example, there's something called Hugging GPT. It basically takes about 20 different types of AIs and decides. It basically uses ChatGPT to act like a controller to decide what type of other AI to solve a particular problem. For example, let's say, for example, you wanted to have a conference that was done in real time and you needed to have sign language. Well, right now you'd have to hire an interpreter, someone who knows how to do sign language, and have a videographer and everything else to have that organized. Something like a combined model GPT would be able to develop a script on its own, or it could, produce subtitles from the person actually speaking. Turn those subtitles using speech-to-text technology into actual words. Take those words and turn them into the actual sign language itself. Figure out what movements need to happen. Then another one to render the video to produce the actual model of someone doing a sign language movement. And finally have it rendered to look like it's a real person. So all these things can be combined to do things that right now are absolutely impossible, but these are literally just around the corner. I reckon within a month or two, you'll start seeing stuff like this. So combined models for events particularly are going to be huge. What this all comes down to is that we're only limited by the imaginations that we have. We're on the cusp of being able to basically decide, well, what do we want to do? What sky's the limit? What can you think of? What kind of crazy thing do you want to show at your event that's doable? And before long, like in the next year or two, there's going to be AIs out there that are going to help you achieve it, which means there's going to be a massive reduction in administration time. You can take all the annoying emailing stuff, data entry, all that kind of stuff, offload it to an AI, focus on what's really interesting and important and exciting about events. You can go down to the delegate level, figure out what that person wants to get out of the event and give it to them, which is something we all would love to be able to do now, but it's extremely hard to do and it's just way too time consuming. But with, computers doing most of the heavy lifting, we can do that. And we can spend more time designing the experiences that we want to do. So imagine as an event manager, event professional, someone who's creating these experiences, not to have to worry about all the extra stuff that goes along with it, and just go, well, what do I want to create? And then just create it. It's pretty exciting. So in conclusion, obviously I'm very excited about ChatGPT. I'm excited about the other AIs that are coming out. The sky really is the limit. This is a technology that is only just starting to show what it can do. Over the next 5-10 years, we're going to see some pretty amazing stuff. And really it's going to be up to us as event professionals to shape how we want to use this technology and to get the most out of it. Because if we don't actually actively have some input in how these things are going to be used and input, then someone else is going to impose that on us. And, we're going to have to do things, a different way. Whereas if we can drive this from the inside and use these tools effectively as event professionals, we can achieve some pretty crazy stuff. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what we come up with.